year here with various talent from the films. And that continues throughout the year. We have a Luchino Visconti series that is going to be continuing next week. Some beautiful films from the mid-century of last century from the Italian filmmaker Luchino Visconti. Beautiful, beautiful productions with lush cinematography, fantastic editing, and amazing costumes and production design. So you can check those out. We also operate the Aero Theater over in Santa Monica. We encourage you to check out the program there. We're going to be showing some Francois Truffaut and some Hitchcock over there next week. And we are a membership-supported organization, so if you love the movies and you want to see movies on the big screen continue in Hollywood, we hope that you will join and become a member and part of our team. I just wanted to mention that the comments and opinions expressed during the seminar are those of the participants alone and do not reflect the opinions of the American Cinematheque. So say some good stuff. And now it gives me great pleasure to welcome someone we've worked with for many years, the president of ACE, Stephen Rifkin.
Thank you, Margot, and welcome to the 2019 Invisible Artist Series. We are very happy to have all of the Oscar nominees for Best Editing here with us this morning. So let's give them a round of applause. We'd like to thank all the staff and volunteers of the American Cinematheque and the American Cinema Editors, and especially our staff, Marika Ellis, Gemelin Brunson, Jasmine Staley, and last but certainly not least, our executive director, Jenny McCormick. Now, we would like to take just a moment to recognize a woman who has been producing this event for 19 years. She has been at the heart and soul of ACE and the Motion Picture Editors Guild for decades. None of this would be possible if it weren't for her guiding force. She has helped us grow to what we are as an organization today. Please join me in giving a thankful round of applause to Diane Adler. Diane. I should say Diane Adler, ACE, okay? Before we get started, I want to give a very special thank you to our platinum sponsor, Blackmagic Design. Also, to our gold sponsors, Adobe, Avid, the Motion Picture Editors Guild, and NAB. We absolutely could not put on events such as this without our incredible sponsors. And I want to say that Blackmagic Design has donated gifts today, totaling nearly $5,000, which we'll be giving away at the end of the show. So stay in your seats. Yes, absolutely. One of the prime objectives of the American Cinema Editors is to advance the art of film editing and raise the perception of the craft throughout the world. Events like this do just that. Every year, Oscar-nominated editors share their clips from their extraordinary films and talk about their work. Now, many of you know that this year the Academy wanted to make some trims to the show and thought that editing and cinematography, among a couple other awards, might be likely candidates for this trial. The outpouring of protests and on our behalf, the tremendous outpouring and remarks by prominent filmmakers, industry leaders, directors was astounding. And it really did confirm the undeniable truth that editing is one of the backbones of the filmmaking process. And ironically, it served our purpose in raising the awareness and perception of the craft. So we are very thankful that the Academy had the wisdom to back off on their decision, and all awards will be aired in their entirety tomorrow. And I guess they've found other ways to shorten the telecast. So now let's begin our program. He is our moderator, the president of Motion Picture Editors Guild, the vice president of American Cinema Editors. He won an Academy Award for editing All That Jazz. He was nominated for an Oscar for Network. Other awards include Eddies for introducing Dorothy Dandridge, Grey Gardens. Please welcome our moderator, Mr. Alan Heim, ACE. And now I am honored, as I am every year, to present the winners of this year's Oscar nominations for Best Film Editing. They are Barry Alexander Brown for Black Klansman, John Ottman, ACE, for Bohemian Rhapsody, Yorgos Mavropsaridis, ACE, for The Favorite. Patrick J. Don Vito for Green Book. And Hank Corwin, ACE, for Vice. Alan?
Hey, thank you. Well, for one thing, all of this will be included in the broadcast, if we had a broadcast. So I would like each of you to just give a concise history of how you got here and how you started, just to begin. And let's keep it short if we can, because there's a lot more we'll go to. So, Barry.
Well, I started out in documentaries, not as an editor, and eventually was cutting my own ducks because I couldn't afford anybody. And my friends at the time, in the mid-'80s, and we were all young and broke, like Spike Lee and Mira Nair, thought I could edit. And so they hired me. And they hired me over and over and turned me into an editor.
That is concise. I love it. John?
Hello? Okay. I mean, I was one of those weird kids that was make little films in parents' garage and basically through USC just kept making movies, and then people would comment on the editing and long story short, met Bryan Singer in film school. He had a short film to do. I ended up co-directing it with him, and then from there we got a feature film for Sundance. Then the composer dropped out the 11th hour, so I wrote the score to that, and then that's when this sort of blackmail thing began, when we put The Usual Suspects together, and I said, I just want to write the score, and he says, you're never writing the score for me unless you're the editor. So that's how I ended up doing the scoring and the editing together on so many films. But yeah, so it was just basically part of the filmmaking process for me to edit films, you know, obviously, because that's filmmaking is editing, so. Yeah.
So you were kind of forced into it.
I was forced into it, yes.
What a sad story.
Yes, I was not forced into it. I was from my film school years in London. I studied in London Film School. I wanted to be an editor due to my personality. I guess I'm a lonely person. So I finished there. I went back to Greece because there was no work in London, and I started in commercials. I had very special teachers in Greece, and I've been doing this profession for about 40 years now, starting from commercials and then short and feature films.
I went to film school at Chapman University, and actually one of my teachers is out there, Greg Hobson, my old teachers. And so I went there, and by my senior year, I knew I wanted to be in editing. I had an internship for Rosie O'Neill, Trials Rosie O'Neill television series, and I was a runner for that, and I just worked my way up. I worked with a lot of great editors, a lot of ACE award winners, Eddie Award winners. Debbie Neal Fisher is one I worked with a long time. And then I broke out and started editing after that, after working with all these editors and kind of learning from them and growing. And then ever since then, I've been working.
You know, I was writing plays, and I followed my girlfriend to New York City, and I quickly realized I was a shitty writer. And so I ended up getting a job as a runner in a commercial film editing house. And, you know, I just worked my way up, cutting commercials and music videos, and then I got asked. I worked with Bob Richardson, who was Oliver Stone's DP, and my first feature experience was, you know, was working on JFK as an editor.
You've also done a lot of work in commercials. You've had your own company for a while, and I think you're done with that one, but...
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys are very concise. What am I going to do with the rest of the program?
We got to keep it moving.
So you started working with Spike, based on being friends.
Yeah.
And you've done about half his movies, about 15, we figured?
15 or 16 movies, yeah. Although when we were counting it up, I think I may have forgotten something along the way. But yeah, Spike and I go way back. We met in 1981. So whenever he was still at NYU, and whenever he worked on something, he was doing something, you know, he would ask me to help out, and I would help out, and you know, and whenever I was doing something, he helped me out in those early 80s, you know, and then he did She's Gotta Have It. And I mean, I didn't know what the script was or anything, but, you know, my buddy came along and said, will you work on this? And it really meant at that moment to do the sound design, because I knew enough about, you know, cutting tracks to do it. And I actually knew how to do a cue sheet, which absolutely nobody else, Spike, knew at that moment, knew how to do a cue sheet. And you know, but it was one of those things where, you know, your friend says, you know, will you help? And you just help, right? And I cut one scene in She's Gotta Have It. It was a scene he was having a big trouble with. It was shot up above, looking down at Nola and Greer in the bed. And there's a sex scene. And he had kind of two elements of it. And it just wasn't working for him. So he said, can you try it? And I tried something there. And actually, one thing I did that I could see I could do just to make him laugh at one moment was I had Greer get into the bed twice, because I saw, I got 2 takes here. You know, and I'm gonna, you know, so, and I thought, this will be funny. Well, this Spike said, wow, I love it. And we've used that 2-take thing ever since. So you gotta be really careful about how you're joking around, because they can follow you the rest of your life. And then, you know, he asked me to do School Days. And then my friend Mira Nair was doing her first film, Salam Bombay. And she said, wow, okay, you're cutting for Spike? Okay, you can cut for me too. So I said, sure, you know. But I mean, in those early days.
That was a great movie.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, those first few films, I really expected somebody to walk into the editing room and say, what's he doing here? You know, you got a real budget. You can't hire your buddies to cut your movie. You got to get a real editor. I mean, I really expected all the way up until about Malcolm X. I thought somebody was going to come in and say, all right, buddy, come on. You know, because I just didn't see myself as an editor. I didn't, you know. I kept thinking I was going to go back and do more documentaries or write. But, hey, it's been a great ride.
So, John, you came into this with from music, sort of.
No, music came after. It was, like I said, I made films ever since starting as a kid, and the music was a hobby after I graduated from SC. I just got some used equipment together and started rescoring my friends' student films because they had these terrible scores on them. But it taught me how to write film music. I mean, one of the ways, and yeah. So the filmmaking, the editing came first.
And you did an amazing job on the music, on a musical film, a gigantic musical film.
Right. I mean,
so
I guess
that
it kind of made
worked.
sense. Yeah. I fell in the right place at the right time, you know. But yeah, I guess I was a little less intimidated than maybe someone who wasn't a composer doing this film. My only fear was Brian May really coming in and watching me, you know, freaking out about something I chopped up because, you know, inevitably the sequences had not be played in the real time in terms of the true song length. So and inevitably it'd be a guitar solo where I tried to truncate some time. So, but we worked it out. You know.
Yorgos, how did you start working with
Yeah, I mean,
your
I must
director?
tell you, before I went to London Film School, I studied drama, but I didn't want to continue working there, but it was a very good experience. So at that time, I was working part-time to finance myself on a post-production company in Athens that was doing the dubbing for The Battle or Little House in the Prairie, if you remember a long time ago. So that was my experience with Moviola. So I go to London with nothing, just my diploma from the drama school, and I met John Fletcher, who was, you know, from Free Cinema, a sound guy, very nice guy, and he said, okay, but you cannot go in here. You have to have a film or a script. And I said, yeah, but I'm an editor. He said, okay, come and show me in the Moviola. I did show him, and you know, he took me to London Film School, and from the first day I was an editor. Everybody wanted me as an editor there, so you know, after that I came back to Greece, as I said, and you know, we were doing commercials to be able to do films, basically, because there was no infrastructure to support young directors and stuff like that, and I was in a very good company, you know, in between ages, from Yorgos Lanthimos and the other people before me. So it was a natural, you know, outcome for me to become an editor.
And Patrick, I guess you sort of covered it, but
Yeah, I mean, I basically, after I worked with Debbie Neal Fisher for a while, my first editing job, I did some short films. I did a short film for Faye Dunaway, which was interesting. But to say the least, I have some stories.
we can talk about that later.
I'll tell you in private. I have a really weird story from that one. But basically, my first thing that I cut by myself was a TV movie for Dennis Dugan called Carol's Christmas. And then I worked with Donald Petrie on My Life in Ruins. And then I just started working with all these directors that I'd worked with as an assistant before and who were hiring me now as an editor. And I worked with Pete for the first time on Movie 43. And I got on that show working with Steve Brill. And then I stayed on and recut all the shorts with all the directors. And then Pete reshot an interstitial, and that's how I got to know him a little bit. But he was busy doing Three Stooges at the time, and then we did a pilot together. And that's kind of, it was only 3.5 weeks, but we got to know each other a little bit better. And then this script came up, and I read it, and I just said, I emailed Pete immediately and said, I gotta do this. How can I get in on this? And so I fought to get the job, basically.
Hank.
Okay, so what exactly is the question?
Well,
I'm sorry.
well, I always find it fascinating to see how people work with the same directors more than once. I've always found it difficult to do that myself. But draw your own conclusions. So, you know, you've worked with people a few times, and, you know, how did that come about?
Well, you know, initially you develop a language with your director, and ultimately there develops a shorthand and hopefully a friendship and an intellectual and emotional kinship. You know, so you'll work with your director, and it will be almost second nature for him to come back to you, him or her to come back to you. If things work out, sometimes things don't work out, you know, and then you move on. But I love working with directors more than once because it's like we're just like learning the different colors of how we work. You know, that's pretty much how it's worked. For me, you know, what I find is each director seems to have some kind of an emotional signature. You'll have Oliver Stone, and you know, he's in one place, or Robert Redford's in another place, or Terrence Malick's in another place, and Adam McKay is just in a whole different place.
So you kind of adapt at the same time.
Yeah, no, editors are great adapters, or we die.
No, I've always felt that the difficult part of an editor's job is standing between the director's vision of what he had shot and what's really there on the film. So,
well, it's always the director's idea.
Yeah.
It always has to be the director's idea, whether it is or not.
Yeah, eventually. So it's a heavily psychological field we're in here. People don't usually think of it that way, but I do. So I think we're ready to move on with some clips, if that's okay. You good with that? Okay, so we can all go back to our seats for the moment, and the first clip will be from Black Klansman.
Let's go back to the morning of March. Absolutely no evidence to back it.
Here. Yeah, we can all talk about it, and please feel free to interrupt.
I was
Is that
telling
how
him it
the
sounded.
movie ends?
I was saying it sounded a lot better than when I saw it in the plane.
Yeah, things move on very quickly in the world, don't they? Okay, this happens to lead me into a question I've always wanted to ask you, I guess, or Spike. The shot that opened the sequence, which is the dolly shot and the movement,
The floating, yeah, that's
floating shot. Was that an accident too, or?
Oh, by Spike? No.
No, by you years ago. Did you use 2 takes?
No, no.
Okay.
That was never my idea. Even though on one Q&A I took the credit for it with Spike sitting beside me, you know, and he looked at me like, what? You know? But no, I mean, Spike came up with that, and I don't really remember what the first film was that he did it in. What?
Jungle Fever.
Oh,
Yeah.
There you go. And I didn't cut Jungle Fever. So, but Sam Pollard did. He's a great editor. And, you know, but Spike likes those shots, you know? And so I think he's always looking for a place to put them.
Yeah. When I have watched Spike's movie, I've always been taken out of the movie by the shot. In this case, I thought it was an absolutely wonderful use. It built the tension. I mean, when he does stuff of people walking on the street, I just want to see some movement in their bodies, and it always throws me and removes me from the actual experience. But this was an incredible clip you pick.
Yeah, and also that shot is it's shot in ectochrome, which is a reversal of positive stock. So all of a sudden in that shot, everything shifts for the end of the movie. The rest of the film is shot in 35mm negative, and that's shot in a positive stock. So even the grain, everything is a little bit shifted. The color shifts, and that, you know, and you have that floating shot. And I mean, one element of it is Spike really wanted them, the actors, to just be staring. And JD, John David Washington, blinked a couple of times. And so Spike goes, "Oh man," he says, "Does he do that in every take?" I said, "Yeah, he does it in every take." So, you know, it's a wonderful thing that we can do now, you know, is just, we remove blinks, you know?
Speaking of eyes, the shot of the eye with the reflection in it, obviously an optical.
It was not an optical.
Ah, see, there
They
I know
shot.
everything.
They shot that. They shot that.
That's
Yeah.
a remarkable shot.
Gorgeous, huh?
Yeah, absolutely remarkable. Also, when you got into the current history, the recent history of racism.
Charlottesville.
Yeah, I was very surprised when I saw the film originally, and I was delighted to see it. I mean, was that always planned?
It wasn't always planned. I mean, it wasn't in the script. They'd written the script and they were already in pre-production when Charlottesville happened. But as soon as it happened, Spike knew he was going to use something there. But we were, you know, I was cutting, and he told me this is what he wanted to do. But he also told me, listen, but don't bother with that. Don't bother with it at all. Don't even look for the footage until we get a cut that I begin to feel comfortable with. But I showed him my first cut on January 8th, and he really liked the cut. So immediately at the end of that screening, he said, "Okay, we got to start getting the footage for Charlottesville." The next day he came in and said, "Okay, we got the footage?" I said, "Spike, man, you know, it's been a day, you know." But Spike is like, "We gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. We gotta get that footage." And so it was every day. He'd come in and look at me like, "What is your problem? What's the matter with you, man? You can't get just some footage of this place? You know, get it in here, you know." But he had already decided from January 8th on, we're going for Cannes, which meant that at the beginning of March, we had to have pretty much a locked movie and a film that we felt really good about to show to Cannes, which meant all the footage in Charlottesville had to be in there. So he would just say, "We gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go."
Well, I'm kind of surprised that somebody didn't do this research before.
It's Spike, though.
It's Spike.
Everybody, listen, Spike is like, he's got his ideas about where to put your focus of your energy. And for him, he didn't want to start thinking about Charlottesville until the moment I want to start thinking about it. And that's just the way he is. And then he wants it done right then. And I don't think Spike is alone in this. I think many directors are impatient to see it once they have an idea. Don't you think this is true? Yeah. Everybody?
Yeah.
Right?
For sure. I mean, there's
Right?
a lot.
You don't have a director that sits around and says, "Okay, take your time with that."
Oh yeah.
Yorgos, how are you like that when you're cutting your own stuff?
Lanthimos says I'm very slow, but you know he accepts me.
But you're patient with yourself, are you?
Well, no, he does tell me that you know we must hurry, but he does give me the time. Yeah, he knows that okay, it will take you 1 week. I'll come back in 1 week. So we have,
Who is this guy?
You know, this is a quick aside. The end montage of Vice, I had Charlottesville, and it was really the spine of the ending. And then we heard that Barry and Spike did it. I was so pissed off.
Yeah, sometimes the world catches up with us in our cutting rooms, and things are in the air, and that
True.
certainly was in the air in a very unpleasant way. But this was fabulous. So feel free, by the way, anytime you want to interrupt each other.
Well, I have a question for
That
John.
one cut you did, I just don't,
You don't get it, right? What were you thinking? But John, you were on your own in the editing room, right? And so you had a very different experience.
It was different. Well, actually, it was
Was it-
different, but not too different for me, because he tends to go away for a while and just let me do the cut and then come out, and he wants to, it's sort of an excuse for being lazy, but also he likes to say he wants to maintain objectivity over his own material, so he would go away for 2 months or so, and then I would put a cut together, and then he'd come back, and he would always say, forget what he had done, so if he's moved in a certain way. I mean, I think that's common. Directors want to walk in to be surprised or moved by something he did that they didn't expect. So he doesn't, in films where he wasn't gone, and I'm sure this is very common, doesn't want to taint something that you might, a discovery you might make on your own by tainting your mind with some preconceived thing about what he wants. So I think he would derive joy from seeing something he didn't expect. So
He who shall not be named.
And yeah. But this one, people say it must have been just awful. I go, well, I didn't have a score to have to worry about, and I was left on my own. What editor doesn't want to be left alone?
So this is really your cut. This is really your cut.
Yeah. So for me, it was sort of amazing. I mean, there were hard parts of it, of course, because when you have to go in your inevitable debates with the studio, test screening results and battles, creative battles, you can depend on a director to wage your wars for you. Here's what you got to say. Go get that. So I didn't have that, so I had to be the bad guy, which I've done before with Fox or studio. I mean, I'm not. They're partners. Everyone's a creative partner, but you inevitably have to fight for what you want. And so I would sometimes push Graham King, who's this big, imposing kind of producer. And I'd say, Graham, you're being a fucking pussy. Don't let them do that, So, the memos, the tossing and turning to bed at night, and the writing the 5-page memos about, they're gonna wreck it, don't let them do this. So, it's the worrying and biting the fingernails. But that's the other part of editing, which we
degree of charm of not having a director around. They
Yes,
can be
there's a
pretty pesky.
degree.
I did a movie that I came in to fix. They said 5 weeks, make it funny. So I did it, and then they screened both versions, the director's and mine scored 20 points higher, and they said, that's the movie we want to make. And so then the directors freaked out, and I spent a year in it without the directors. I worked probably 4 days with them, and I just cut for the producers. And then the movie, it was a small movie, good old-fashioned orgy. And it was with SNL, Jason Sudeikis and a bunch of people like that. And then it was this crazy battle of directors on, directors off, actors refusing to loop, and that whole thing. But we were a super low budget movie, so it wasn't as, I'm sure, as difficult as.
I think you're lucky too if the producers you're working for have the same taste factor, because then you're in trouble, because then you're never going to see the eye. And fortunately, Graham King had done, basically, 5 or 6 Scorsese films, so we had sort of the same, mindset about things, and his partner, Dennis O'Sullivan. So if we hadn't had a similar viewpoint on things, it would have been sort of nightmarish.
Boy, it could go south so easily.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you guys are having such a good time. I have nothing to do. I love it. But we have to show some more clips. But if I may, I did a film where a studio, which you just named, but shall go nameless, and a star had someone else come in with my permission they asked my permission to make some changes for the star. And there were 10 awful changes made. The director walked off the movie. We also had 2 screenings on the same night. And they scored a point higher, both of which were lower than my original cut. But we don't want to talk about that. And the director walked off. He said, I don't want to know anything more about this. And I had to decide whether to leave with him or try and get back some of the material had been just kind of mutilated. And I sat down with the head of production and I said, let's be grown-ups here. And we spent the morning looking at the movie, and she gave me 5 of the 10 changes back. And I felt very good about that, but it's an awkward position to be in. And I don't think the director has ever seen it to this day. Anyway, we have another clip to look
What
at.
movie was that?
I don't want to say that.
You can't even say what movie?
No, I can't
Who was
say what.
starring in it?
I won't say that either. Okay.
Our breaking news tonight. Let's go back to the morning of March. Absolutely no evidence to back tonight. Let's go back to the morning of March. Absolutely no evidence to back tonight. Let's go back to the morning of March. Absolutely no evidence to back
Good choice. That's an absolutely spectacular sequence.
Thanks.
And just visually interesting. And talk about the sound. You must have been really deeply involved in
Very. I mean, I'm a sound fanatic when I'm cutting a film. So I'm actually one of the not particularly this kind of scene, but my reward to myself when I cut a scene is to do the sound design, especially if it's like an X-Men film or something. I do all the humming of the machines and the ambiances, and I just love doing that stuff. So that's I can't wait till I'm finished cutting the scene so I can do that. But this one, it was more just practical sound where it was just the back and forth between the studio and the recording environment. But I just chose this scene because it's my favorite sequence in the film, aside from Live Aid, but I have post-traumatic stress disorder when I watch that scene. This one is a joy to watch, because this was my first, I swear to God, my first assembly, and it would never change. And so I was very, very, thanks. This is the
How
scene.
can you call that an assembly?
Well, cut. I cut fine because I have to usually score an entire movie, so I gotta just make those decisions right away. But I was very protective of this, like a mother, crouching over her baby, because I just was sure someone's going to throw a grenade into it or destroy with a bazooka after test screenings and so forth, and studio notes. And so I was always just very freaked out that this sequence would get messed up. So, but every test screening we had, it's an audience pleaser, and so it never changed. I was always rolling around in bed as usual, worrying about that sequence being destroyed. So. Yeah. Oh, and the other thing about it, they're the reason I found it. I was proud of it was because both the curse and a blessing for editors is when actors go off the rails, when they don't adhere to the script. It's great and it's also awful. So they had such a chemistry among each other. So if they said something, normally someone else would answer with an appropriate answer. But many times, obviously the other actor wasn't there. And so I had to sort of re-script out the logic of the scene and then come up with wild lines and reaction shots, of course, to create a whole new logic to the scene. For instance, when he says something about, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do opera, that was used to be one of the first lines of the scene. So I changed it and added a different line leading into it. Anyway, things like that. So that's why I'm proud of the sequence.
So. So, those of us who've been living in caves, I mean, you obviously had a kind of a partial nightmare experience, what with your director being fired, someone else coming in, near the end, right? To direct a couple of
He came in for the last 2.5 weeks of shootings to get us through, and then he hung around for about 4 weeks in post just to see his scenes, and he had the right to, as a replacement director, scene overview of the film and have a test. And then he was in pre-production of Rocket Man, so then he left. And
And so then Bryan Singer came back? Or,
no. No.
Oh,
Were you directing the actors in the ADR studio then? With
Yeah.
the new lines that you were coming up
Yeah.
with?
I always do that anyway. So, I mean, that's common. I mean, it's not uncommon for an editor to direct an ADR session. I mean, there's a lot of time when the director is overwhelmed with a billion other things. So I don't think I'm unique in that regard. Am I?
No, I do it too.
Yeah, yeah.
I've done it too.
When I was doing this, Pete was, we were finishing, and Pete had his show, Loudermilk, in Canada, shooting. So he had to leave. So the whole post process was just me by myself. And then he would fly in every once in a while on the weekend, and we'd show him a mix, or we'd show him, some stuff. So he was so busy at the end there, he couldn't be there.
I mean, there are certain actors who are going to have a problem with it, and they're like, where the hell's the director? So it's
Denzel.
Okay. Fassbender. So although we did it with no director, I did his ADR, but on some X-Men films. But there are, rightfully so, there are the actors are going to want to know they want their director. But most often they understand the process and they're okay, with having the editor do it.
Yeah, when we did the the lines for censorship on network, Sidney Lumet talked Patty Chayefsky into writing some really awful lines. And I sensed that Robert Duvall, of all people, would absolutely not do it. So we got to the ADR stage, and Robert was there, and I gave him the pages, and he sat down, and you could sort of see smoke coming out of his ear. And he said, "Where's Sidney?" I said, "I'm trying to reach him," and we tried, and then the producer showed up, and when the producer showed up, he came walking out of the elevator. Duvall got up out of his chair. He'd been stewing for a long time, and there was nothing I could say to him. He was just, you didn't want to go near that. It was going to explode, which he did. He got up. The producer came to him with his hand out to shake hands. He ignored his hand. He ripped up the script pages, tossed it in his face, and walked out of the room. So we did what I wanted to do originally, which was...
Exactly. You probably didn't like the lines in the first place, right?
I hate
You're like,
the lines.
"Thank God."
Were terrible.
Yeah. Same thing with Fassbender on Days of Future Past. He goes, "I'm fucking not going to say this. They're spoon feeding the scene." I go, "Exactly. You don't want to say it? Oh darn!"
This was just for censorship purposes. Yeah, exactly. Oh darn.
Sorry, he wouldn't say it.
Yeah, we had. Well, there were 7 bullshits in network, and much to our surprise, the network gave us 1. But I decided early on that the only way to make sense out of this was to cut around it and just make people not realize it was happening. Because we had a lot of nasty talk. And it's tough. Some actors just wouldn't do it. And after Duvall decided not to, we decided to heck with it. It wasn't worth it.
Yeah. They tried to loop a bunch of stuff for this movie because of all the racial slurs, and it's like, if you take them out, the movie makes no sense. Like the whole point, like you can't make a nicer racial slur. It doesn't make any sense. And so we had to fight. Like they go into loop and they go, "I'm not saying that. No way."
And Do the Right Thing. We had to. Spike and I had talked about it. I was like, "Nah, this is never going to be on television. Never going to be on an airplane." Well, then they came back and said, "You got to do a nicer version." And Spike said, "I'm not doing it. You're doing it." And so I'm going in. So we got Mickey Ficky. That was what they came up with. Mickey Ficky. Mickey Ficky this and Mickey Ficky that.
I don't want to ask what that means because I.
You know what it means?
Yeah, I guess I do. We suffer a lot at this stage of the production. It's very hard to do that kind of thing. Anyway, shall we move on to the next clip?
Let's go back to the morning of March. Absolutely no evidence of action. Let's go back to the morning of March. Absolutely no evidence of action. no evidence to back it. Our breaking news tonight, let's go back to the morning of March. Absolutely no evidence to back it.
Okay. That, again, a wonderful sequence. We're very lucky here today, I think. How much of that was scripted?
Well, that's why I tried to give you this example. The way we developed this shorthand with Lanthimos is that he shoots all his films in linear order, and he respects the continuity of time and space all the time. So it's a decision that comes on our, we do the assembly, we do the rough cut, we work a lot on the scenes, inside the scenes to fix, the actors and everything. And then comes the moment when we start to deconstruct and say, okay, let's try this, let's try that, let's try this. But this was a very easy, let's say, scene because the background, the men are there as a playground, the women are scheming, and it was that sort of Abigail entering the room with a man was the main point of this scene because it was the first time we do reveal her as what she is because she has just poisoned the person, so she's not innocent. So we wanted to create all this tempo to come over to her. So as you saw, the music is very important. We start with Anna Meredith, this pizzicato strings playing, preparing the stuff and the scene, and then Bach comes with two different pieces of music combined together, and using this, the Mascots or the four sideline matches to create this interplay between what's happening in the men's room with the orange man and what the real situation is like. The one character falls out of grace and the new favorite comes over, and then how to relate it with this playground of men and Harley hating Rachel, and the guy pointing at something, and we see Rachel. So all this montage sequence to create some other kind of, not to support the basic idea of the script, but using the cinematic language and not using the scenes in linear order. And by the way, we never do ADR. It's another thing that is different from what I had before, because Lanthimos doesn't like it, I don't like it, because it's this kind of old aesthetic morality that you cannot separate an actor from his voice. But we have a very good sound designer, Johnny Ben, and he always succeeds in keeping the original.
It was great how you built the tension because you didn't quite know what was going to happen when she would fall off the horse, sort of. And by stretching it, it was very exciting.
and making more operatic with the music and everything, just to have a specific language separate from supporting just the plot, to have an attitude, aesthetic attitude. Of course, it's Lanthimos' attitude towards all his films.
In a lighter vein, how'd you get the rabbits to do such wonderful
You mean
things?
the last one? The last
The rabbits, the bunnies.
No. There's no. Are you talking about the last scene of the movie or here?
No, here. The
They're all around running. We didn't do anything CGI. We just cleaned some of the mess they created on the floor. That's all. They were running around, They were,
Yeah. Tough to get rabbits to match action, isn't it? It's just a splendid sequence.
I think it's an example of there's a misconception the editor is right to make things shorter, but part of the art of editing and part of the most agonizing sequences as an editor is to protract the action, to make more of something that was never there. So I think that's one of the most rewarding things is when you can pull that off, and that was that kind of sequence. Yeah.
That's true, yes. It's the one that gives us, as editors, our reason of being. It's not like following only the plot and supporting the plot. It's creating something that wasn't there originally. The elements were there, but how to mix them and make something more out of it. A combination of shots to mean something more than just these two shots.
Yeah, that's very, very well said, both of you, actually. To stretch. People always think, oh, you guys make everything shorter.
Right.
Nah. I mean, we're protecting
I think
performance.
most people think an editor is just a person who takes things out of things. I
Yeah.
think we're conditioned into that because of the years of when we watch TV, it's edited for television, or a movie on a plane. This has been re-edited for, and so it creates this perception among people who don't know what editing is, that it's just the removal of things, that somehow the film just, magically makes itself, and we take things out,
Yeah.
And there's also people
Can
who
I
think
tell
an
one
orchestra
story
is
about
playing.
that?
Sure.
On Do the Right Thing, when Sal, a lot of people have seen Do the Right Thing here, right? And so there's a point where the pizza owner, Sal, has beaten up Radio Raheem's radio, his boombox. And we got there, and both Spike and I felt like in the edit, oh man, we gotta hold this moment for a moment, for a minute, some tension in the air before everything explodes. And so I found that all the actors, between the point where they were getting ready to dive into the fight, between that moment where everything's rolling, camera's rolling, sound's rolling, and before Spike says action, they're all like this. They're all just like intense, looking. And so we took all of those moments around the room that wasn't supposed to ever be used for anything, and created that moment of tension, because you could cut, boom, 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 before, boom, it ignites and everything just goes crazy. That's the kind of thing you're talking about, right? Where
I
you
have
go
no
in.
idea what you're talking about right now. I'm totally confused. No.
Okay,
No, but
when
exactly,
you
exactly.
shoot.
Okay, I guess we can move on to the next clip.
Our breaking news tonight. Let's go back to tonight. Let's go back to the morning of March. Absolutely no evidence of action. Let's go back to the morning of March. Absolutely no evidence of action.
Also, nice sequence. Why'd you pick this one?
I wanted to talk about transitions. I wanted to show something different than what maybe people would expect, but this movie was all about transitions. We had a movie that was 2 hours and 10 minutes, but we didn't want it to feel like 2 hours and 10 minutes. So every transition was looked at to try to see how we can smooth it out, do something different. The first scene with the letter, that joke that ends the scene was actually in the middle of the scene. She reads the entire letter, that joke happens as soon as you make a meal, then we go back to the table, we have that whole scene, and then there was another joke. And it just seemed like that other joke was a B joke and not an A joke, and that was the A joke. So we moved that joke to the end, let her read the letter over the conversation, and boom, it shoots you out into the next sequence. So then the next sequence, you've got this montage that was created from pieces that we didn't use, like in the car, the laughter, there was a sequence that he talks about being personal friends with JFK, and Tony laughs and says, oh, now who's the bullshit oddest? So we took that piece and put it in there. And then what I noticed was we had the next scene is the rain scene, and the rain sounds a lot like applause. So I took pieces of applause from other sequences that I didn't use and went applause, louder, 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 rain. So everything is propelling you to the next scene. There's audio transitions that help move that along. And so all the way through, I was always thinking about how do we make this not feel like a 2 hour and 10-minute movie. And that's, and thankfully, when we got feedback, people were saying, I wanted it to continue. I thought it was great. I didn't feel like it was 2 hours and 10 minutes. And so that kind of helped, I think, do that.
You know, this is so much a part of what we do. It's truly invisible, and it's just a gorgeous way of thinking. And it's not necessarily flashy, but it's so efficient, and it's just so beautiful in its symmetry. I really love that.
Oh, thanks. The other thing about the movie that people don't realize is that we have over 400 visual effects in this movie. But they're visual effects you don't see. That's the whole point of them. You can't see them because we're not trying to be flashy. Actually, Allie, one of my assistants, is out there, and she was the wrangler. Allie Lewis, she wrangled all the effects. And so we have, besides the Mahershala, you've got, that's Chris Bauer's playing, and we put Mahershala's head on Chris Bauer's body.
It's amazing because we tried that, it didn't work.
Yeah, we shot him. Mahershala studied for 3 months to get the right positioning and, and the right stance and posture, and then we shot them both. But ultimately, I just cut with Bauer's, and then just picked pieces and said, put this head on there. And then we have crazy shots, like the bridge shot in the movie was completely created. That was a shot that was a stock shot. And it had Priuses and stuff. We actually screened it with Priuses. We had to say beforehand, you're gonna see a Prius on the bridge. And don't worry, we'll take that out. So we did that. They completely took the bridge, took all the wires out, took the cars out, put in new blacktop, both levels, then added, those are all 3D cars. Those are all digital cars, all of them, as you as the camera comes into the two Cadillacs. And so there was all these different levels of things that you have difficulty that you have to kind of smooth out to make this smooth ride, because it's a different kind of movie than, you know, other kind of comedies or like an action thing or something. You don't want the editing to show. You want it to be smooth and just kind of be in the background and just let the story, you know, speak for itself.
As a Bronx native, where did you shoot the material?
Everything outside of New Orleans, the whole movie.
Yeah,
Even
it looked much like the Bronx.
Even like you see like the Carnegie Hall, that was actually a theater in New Orleans, and we just pasted Carnegie Hall above it. Inside Carnegie Hall, it was a theater in New Orleans. We pasted the real Carnegie Hall behind. So all that stuff, there's tons of, you know, things like that throughout the movie. There was a lot of, one of the funny ones is in the car, they got the car last minute, and it had a tear in the material of the roof, and one of the hooks was rusty, and it's supposed to be a brand new car. So almost 80% of the car shots are digital effects, getting rid of the tear, getting rid of the rusty hook. I mean, just like tedious stuff like that, so Allie had to deal with that. So.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing. You wonder why somebody didn't just chrome plate that hook and...
I know, it's like, it was literally last minute. We got it like at, you know, that car I think they got literally like days before the shoot. It was like that last minute.
Yeah, we had nasty rug stains in the office of Ray Foster.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I was looking at this rug stain the whole time. I couldn't take my eye off it. So why didn't they just...
Yeah, but
yeah.
this movie too, every time we look at it, we go to do the DI, and all of a sudden we're seeing it, you know, pristine for the first time. We're like, holy shit, we got to do all this other work we haven't seen before. They come out of the YMCA, and it's like, there's a freaking handicap parking spot. They didn't have that in 1962. We got to get rid of that. And so every time it's like, oh my God, there's just endless. And so we just keep finding stuff along the way.
Yeah,
That always happens, right?
Well, yeah, that always happens. The other thing is, we don't watch dailies on a big screen for the most part
Right.
anymore. I don't know.
No.
And you don't see this stuff. So until you come to the first screening and you say, oh my God, I got to remove those water sprinklers or
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah, we had a situation in Malcolm X where Denzel, as Malcolm, is reading off of these cards, right? And the first time we projected, one of these cards, the back of one of these cards says, I love you, Denzel. With that spike, and I went,
But you know, it's a great tool that we have now to be able to fix things right up to the end.
And not just fix things, but imagine things. If you can imagine it, and if they've got the money, you can do it.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's amazing. So if you are doing a sequence like that, but you imagine something, you want to do a previs of it. If you really feel that it's worth the cost, they can do it. They can do anything.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Except for move heads, we couldn't figure that out.
So funny. Yeah, they did a really great job on that, and we shot that. They shot that sequence, the first one of him playing piano, and we turned it over right away to visual effects, like the next day, and said, start working on this because this is crucial for this movie. If we have to believe this, and if we don't, we're screwed. So they worked, you know, really hard, and I was hard on them as far as getting the stuff perfect. And then it came out great. So we even fooled Steven Spielberg. We sent it to him.
It's astounding to me because the shots are moving, but you said it wasn't Moco.
Yeah. No,
So
we
I don't
didn't.
know
Like the
how
first
they-
shot where he pulls back from the hands and you see that it's Mahershala playing, that wasn't, we didn't do one of those dollies, computer-controlled dollies. We did the move on Chris Bowers, but we just had a lockdown on Mahershala, and they actually had to change the head size, and I thought, oh my God, you're gonna see the detail, the grain or something, and it worked out. It looks really good. So
Yeah, I remember seeing the movie and thinking that's one of the best actors playing piano
too.
I'd ever seen. So I'm glad
Yeah.
to get the explanation.
yeah, it's pretty amazing. There's actually one funny there's one funny shot. It's when he's on stage and you're looking past him to the audience, a tighter shot. It's actually Chris Bauer's arms through Mahershala's sleeves, playing, and he's hiding behind him like this, playing blind.
We did that.
Did you do that?
and nothing like that in all that jazz.
We didn't have optical.
Well, I mean, you didn't do anything.
No.
It was work and cutting.
No, Fosse was such a perfectionist that basically he wouldn't leave the set until he had something he thought was perfect. and it usually was. I don't remember that we did any special effects. Yeah, none. Maybe the main title sequence, which was an accident, but otherwise, I mean, we had no title sequence. Fosse wanted to do neon lights, and I then got a trailer. Yeah, it was a trailer someone was making, and it had the Broadway sign on it that said all that jazz. And I called Fosse and I said, I think we just found our main title sequence. And it turns out that these guys at the trailer house had built this thing and had already torn it down. So I had to take what they had and make it optically switch with the music, fit with the music. But I don't believe, no, nothing.
Well, those are the days when you get like an optical back, you know, after you've had a line through it, and it comes back as a dissolve, and you're like, oh, awesome, you know, I can't wait till to see it as a dissolve or a fade out. It's really, and I was always excited getting the optical back just for a dissolve,
Yeah, and you'd have to send it out, and it would be days. Yeah. And but the nice thing is you never got a producer saying at a screening, are you going to remove that line before it goes into the
Audience would say that. You know, you'd screen these films, and you'd have a line like that, and then in the focus group later, be like, what was that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I've actually.
But the great thing, I mean, you know, romanticizing the old days, because we're, is that when you had a screening for the studio, or even we never tested suspects, but for studio executives, it was clear that it would always have someplace to go. It was a work in progress because you had cat hair on the thing, my blood from the splicer, you know, and it looked like hell. It sounded terrible because you're basically doing butt cuts on mag. And so you always knew when you're watching it's a work in progress. Now, your first screening is it's perfection. You know, it's, you know, the sound is perfect and...
Pretty much you can't get away without showing
so it's
everything,
hard for them
even
to
to the studio
imagine
people.
Yeah.
They should have more imagination, I always thought. But then you learn, okay, if the gun goes off, you better put in a shot.
Well, in a strange way, the more polished it is, the more they're unable to imagine something else. But I think it made them imagine things when it was clearly reminding them when they see splice marks that it's a work in progress. You know.
Yeah. Plus, when you're on the stage, the mixing stage, and you had to like hang the next reel, you had a lot of time to go play pool and ping pong. Now you don't have that time anymore.
Yeah, I wonder where all those pool tables and ping
they're
pong
still there, but like
weight sets in the mixing room went.
Editors have gotten fat.
What do you say, Hank?
Editors have gotten fat because they don't move around as much.
Yeah, it always took a lot of energy to play pool, right? The ping pong was... so let's move on then to Hank's clip.
Let's go back to the morning of March. Absolutely no evidence of accident.
reeling him in.
Yeah. You guys are all picking scenes that I loved in the movie when I saw the movie. And this one, too, the fishing intercuts. Where did that come from? I mean,
Well, Lynn Cheney, the real Lynn Cheney, says if you want to understand her husband, you have to know that he's a fly fisherman. You know, so we had that footage. For me, I was fascinated just with the silences in a dialogue scene and the lack of editorial. I mean, if you know anything about the work I've done, I'm generally associated with frenzy and frenetic scenes. I love the fact that in film, you can move around time and space, and you can get into different layers of the way people are thinking, your main characters are thinking. And I think this, you know, I think the film demonstrates just how quietness and cuts that don't join together seamlessly actually create this tension. I guess I don't know if I'm answering the fishing part of things, but
no, you were doing very well.
no, you know, the thing is, many times when you have seamless editing, you lose tension. You know, so as prospective editors or editors out there, what you have to do is see where editing should be visible, and where you can launch people into different layers of reality. You know, so what's so fantastic about film at its best is that you can layer realities. You know, you can have ostensibly a scene where two people are talking. This scene, this whole movie, emblematically, it was just people were talking to each other, and that's pretty much what was going on. You know, so you had to create different layers of reality, different layers of how people were thinking.
Yeah, you had to get into the subtext, really. Here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think you did that really well.
Thank you.
I always had a question in the movie. How come we lost a tremendous period of his life? I mean, his time with Halliburton, and was that ever intended to be in the movie, or just?
You know, I think ultimately you have to make sacrifices when you're putting together a movie, when you're directing a movie. And you know, there's seminal moments where you get the fact that he went off, he worked at Halliburton, he made a fortune. You know, but in the flow of the movie, it didn't really create much more of understanding of where Adam McKay wanted to take the film.
But had it been written and shot? I mean, had you?
No, actually not. You know, but we did have other scenes that were kind of glorious. I mean, we had this fantastic musical number that bit the dust. You know, and as an editor.
A musical number?
Pardon me? Yes.
Can you describe that?
I'm sorry. In the congressional cafeteria, you have Steve Carell and Christian Bale walking through, and Carell's character Don Rumsfeld is teaching him the rules of the road, and you have Brittany Howard from the Alabama Shakes, who's ostensibly a secretary, stand up and break into song, and then the whole cafeteria just explodes. And Adam had the choreographer from Hamilton choreograph, and you have this fantastic kinetic piece with 50 or 60 people singing and dancing, and it just wasn't appropriate. It was.
But we love it.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, the description is great.
Is it on deleted scene somewhere? Are we going to be able to see this?
Yeah, I think you probably will. But it was a redundancy, and sometimes, many times, as editors, we have to just let go of things, and it took months and months to do that. You know, it was honestly, it was an act of growing up with the film. One thing that's so difficult, by the time we all as editors understand our films, completely understand the films, they're done. You know, it's like you finally know how to do it. You could keep cutting and make it better, or make more of the film, but it's over.
yeah, Ralph Rosenblum told me once, you never finish a film, you abandon it. Yeah, this is very true. I mean, first place, so many films have a short shelf life. None of these, I mean, a short theater life. Forget about video and all the other stuff. It used to be that films ran in a theater for a long time, and these did. But you know, by the time you know what the film's about, it's gone from the theater. It's fascinating.
No, it's true. That's one of the reasons why literature, hopefully, well, you know, maybe films could be construed as being the literature of this century. You know, if they're great films. And I think we as film editors and filmmakers have a responsibility to get the truth as accurately as we can.
But the thing, I got a question about the fishing thing. Did they just go off and shoot them fishing?
Yeah,
for a while?
they just shot
Like,
it.
we don't know what we're going to do with this, but we're going to shoot it?
Yeah, I'm sure you've had little B-rolls of this kind of footage. Absolutely.
And how much of it did you shoot? How much did you have to wade through, so to speak? No pun intended.
5 or 6 hours, but you get through. That's what we do. Yeah.
Was there any ever discussion of like trying a version, just a straight version of the movie without just a linear kind of with the...
Yeah, I made short work of that. Yeah. No, you know, because the thing is, it's like a scene like this is like a chess game in many dimensions, you know. And if you start pulling elements out, the whole thing will collapse.
Yeah, I had a feeling that maybe some studio person would come in and say, like, have you thought about, like, did you get any pushback or anything from studio people as far as the style and what you were doing in the movie?
I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, we were doing a movie about Dick Cheney. You know, we got a lot of pushback, but not necessarily about the way I was cutting scenes.
But in the Favorite, was there stuff that they went out and just shot? Was it like this? Was it in the Favorite? Was there things that they just went out and shot? We don't know how this is going to be used?
No, not really.
I'm sure
not-
Spike does.
Not with the budgets they have. I mean, we have. People don't like to spend money on shooting fish. But you never
Anymore.
Anymore, yeah. I did do a film once, and there was a wonderful shot in the middle of a musical number. And I looked at it, and I turned to my assistant, and I said, what is this for? And I figured out a place to put it in, because it was such a great shot. And the director, when he saw the first cut of it, said, I'm so glad you found something to do with that. I had no idea. And every once in a while, you get a little piece of gold.
No, I mean, that's why directors hire us. Hopefully we'll bring another layer of consciousness to what they're doing. You know, many times, maybe most times, they don't appreciate it, or they don't like necessarily where it's going. It may not be their vision, but I think they always appreciate that we're out there trying.
You're probably right. I hope so.
Yeah, me too.
We spend a lot of time with people behind us that we have to satisfy, and yeah, one hopes they appreciate it.
Pete says something funny at one point. We were working in the cutting room, and he says, I have to tell you something. I said, what's that? And he said, I was talking to some friends, and I was saying, like, this movie is just like, it's so easy. It's just cutting itself. And then I said, wait a minute. No, it's you doing that. So I just wanted to tell you, you know, like, that I had this conversation outside, and I thought it was really funny.
Yeah. That's magical things happen when you go to movies. I mean, it's just, when I was a kid, I mean, I went to a lot of movies in the Bronx, and I always thought they just sort of appeared. I mean, some guy showed up with film cans, and
You sent it off to the lab, and it came back?
oh, you know, what lab?
Edited.
I thought the actors made it up. And eventually you learn. So I think we're at the time for questions. About right? Yep. And thank you guys, because I can never get through this without your help. You've been terrific. So,
hello. These are questions from the audience that people wrote down before the panel. And the first one is there a specific film genre that appeals most to you as an editor? And if so, what's the reason?
well, let's start at the far.
If so, I'm sorry?
What's the reason for that being your favorite film genre?
It's a tough one. I mean, I love Jean-Luc Godard films. You know, I don't know what the genre is.
Have you ever done homage to Godard in your cuts?
Yeah, absolutely. With the way he did a movie called Hail Mary, where you have the sound cutting in and out, and I found that rocked my world. It changed my life. Just where you can have a character speaking, and all of a sudden, the character continues to speak, and you hear jackhammers. You know, and the intelligence behind that just blew my mind, and it's still resonating in the way I cut today.
Patrick?
I like everything, really. I mean, I grew up watching every dumb straight-to-video horror movie that ever was created, and love that. And then I started watching, you know, all the classics. I mean, all the Scorsese and stuff that I really liked was in that kind of genre. But I like drama. I like comedy. It's fun to do something different. Is what I really like, is switching up, because for the longest time, it was comedy. That's all I got to do. And, you know, like anybody else can say, they look at your resume and go like, well, that's all you're allowed to do. So getting this movie helps branch me out. I did another movie with John Avid that's not out yet called Three Christs, which is another 60s drama that's about it's Richard Gere, and he's got 3 patients who all think they're Jesus Christ, and he puts them in a room together to see what happens. So it has some comedy, but it's drama. It's Peter Dinklage and Bradley Whitford and Walton Goggins as the Christ. So it's really good, but that's coming out this year. So I've gotten to branch out into some other stuff, and that's what's really great about this, is that, you know, I don't want to be in one thing. I want to be doing everything, you know?
But now you're going to be the 60s guy.
Apparently now I'm the 60s guy. Apparently.
Get Patrick. He knows how to cut the 60s.
Yes, exactly.
It's really weird. I mean, editors get typecast just like everybody else.
Yeah, for sure.
Georgis?
Yes. I didn't grow up in the environment of genres in Greece. As a matter of fact, it was most of the time personal cinema. It was about me and the director and what kind of language he wanted to express himself and how he wanted to do it. So I'm not editing-wise familiar with genres. I haven't done any genre, as a matter of fact, and I'm not sure I would be able to do it because I don't know the rules. So I'm always, as Hank said, you know, of course I'm inspired by Jean-Luc Godard and all these personal artists, and the main thing is to break away from your own habits of thought on your next film, to try something new and don't be afraid of that.
Same thing. I mean, I think we get excited by something that's new. You know, if you've done, you know, I don't know, a noir piece, you want to do something completely different. You don't want to do another one right away. You know, it's the same with film scoring. You know, it's like I would love to do a comedy after I've done a drama. So because there's an excitement in it to, you know, obviously keep your brain fresh and to step into new territory.
Don't we all want to do a Western, too?
I want to do a Western.
And a space movie.
Yeah.
It's always a space movie, absolutely.
And a big Broadway musical. I don't have, you know, all these guys get to do musicals, and, you know, even Hank cuts a scene, and Vice has a musical scene.
You're sitting next to the...
I know.
For me, I just like to do movies that have human relationships in them, and you know, musicals are great fun, but it's important to have a human story behind any movie I do.
Next question is, what is the best place you've been on location editing?
How about the worst place? Can we do that one?
Yeah, do the worst place.
And the worst.
What's the worst place, John?
I was in a crack house in Superior, Arizona, cutting an Oliver Stone film. And on all levels, it was insane and kind of horrible.
Hey, I was to say Montreal, but I really can't outdo that one.
Pardon?
I was to say Montreal, but I mean, you know, can't outdo that.
No, I don't think anybody can beat that one. What about a good one?
New Orleans. I love being in New Orleans for this. It was so much fun. I got to spend 2.5 months there, and my wife came out at Christmas because we had 10 days off, and we did New Orleans Christmas, and it was amazing. Bonfires in the levee where they light these big 15-foot tall structures all the way down the levee to welcome Papa Noel, Santa. And so like that culture and that whole thing was like so much fun. The music, I mean, I got to go, I found this little bar called Dos Jefes, and it was a cigar bar with live music, and all these old musicians would come there. And so I met this guy who used to play, he was the Mary Tyler Moore band leader when they did the show live that he would play, and he was in his 70s, and he toured the South with Jackie Wilson. And so I told him, I'm doing this movie, you gotta, so I talked to him for an hour after he played one day, and he was telling me stories about, yeah, I was the only white guy in the band, and I had to go into the restaurants to get food for the rest of the band, and then we got shot at. This guy in a truck came and shot at the bus. And so like all these great stories, and I had all these old musicians, because they just hung out, it's just this little place, and they hung out and played, and that's all they want to do is play. And it was one of the most amazing times of my life.
Yorgos, did you go on
Well,
location a lot?
I had a very strange experience when we were doing Lobster in Cork, in Ireland. So, you know, it was this hotel, if you watch the film, you saw it, and it looked nice in the beginning, but then slowly you started noticing some, you know, little discrepancies somewhere there, and the food was always the same. You got the menu, so what I'm going to eat today, okay. So it was a bit strange, and in the middle of the shooting, people started seeing ghosts, you know, hearing noises in that old hotel. Yes, and it was, you know, this period, the dark period in the middle of the film, I was freaking out, but then we got over it. It was a paradise to go, you know, 1 hour away to eat in a nice village.
Oh,
John?
No, go ahead.
No, I mean, I don't really have a scintillating or really depressing story in terms of a location. I
Just
mean,
average place.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess I like Sydney, Australia. The Australians love Americans for some reason, and they're just not impressed at all about status and movie stars and so forth. I thought that was really cool. It really drove Brian crazy, but because they could care less, really. Anyway, I love the culture there. So. Yeah.
We shot Miracle at Santa Ana in Italy, and we were able to shoot at Cinecittà. And that's, I mean, anything like that for me is glorious. You know, if we can work on the Warner lot or the Disney lot, or be at Cinecittà, or there's a small place outside of Paris called Juan-Villapont, where we mix Salam Bombay and where Renoir, and, you know, where they, you know, all the great old French directors worked in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s. I don't know, I love that stuff. I love walking around and thinking, oh, I'm here, you know, or being Disney and you're in the mix studio where they built it for Tchaikovsky, and you're thinking, oh, I love this.
Next question is, how do you approach a scene when it needs to be in the film, but it doesn't seem to be working?
Once?
Well,
Patrick?
I'll say something. If I'm working on a scene and I get stuck, sometimes I'll just rethink it completely. I'll start at the end and work my way backwards. I'll start in the middle and work my way. Just kind of trick my brain into thinking about it in a different way. So, you know, it's like I learned it from, like, you know, when I was a kid, I was never good at drawing people and faces. And so someone told me, oh, if you turn it upside down and you just look at a quadrant of it and draw that quadrant and do the next quadrant and do all the way, and then turn it back, you have the picture because you're not looking at this face anymore, you're just looking at lines. And so I liken it to that, where I just take it apart and kind of go, I want to be here right now. So, you know, and the other thing I do is just break the scene down to the absolute, what you need. But take everything out and say, I need this and this and this, and start there, and then start adding stuff back and see where it leads you. And don't be afraid. You know, people always say like, oh, you get horrible notes. Do you ever do them? Like, yeah, I'll try them if I have time, because even if the note is horrible and it's not going to work, I might learn something in the process of doing it and go, now I know how to fix that scene. So it's always about just trying and trying and trying.
Yeah. On film, we used to, and you, I guess, could talk to this, we used to flip the film occasionally and play it right to left or left to right, the other way, so it would give you a fresh look at what you were working on.
But don't most of us find that we're in the middle of a scene and it's not working, and you have to step away for a minute? Mm-hmm. I mean, I do, right? Where you just have to...
Really?
Yeah, you have to step out. You have to step out, sometimes walk around the block. You know? It doesn't that happen?
Yeah, or go somewhere else. I mean, did you work on something else?
Yeah.
To come back to it.
That doesn't happen to you, Hank, huh?
Never. Yeah, no, all the time. You know, sometimes scenes that need to be in the film but aren't working just don't work. Yeah. And maybe they don't need to be in the film. Or in some completely different way.
Yeah, but luckily, those scenes are saved on the DVD, so we can watch the musical number in the cafeteria. Things like that. That would be very cool. I can't wait for it.
You've just sold a lot of DVDs this year.
Yeah. By the way, Patrick, that was a nice plug for your next movie.
Thank you. I tried.
Yeah, no charge.
Well, if I wanted to answer to this question, I mean, I have a director who's never satisfied with everything. So one way we decide to do these montage sequences is like exactly like that. Because, okay, we need the scene, but we don't need all of it. We need just part of it. So it's one way to get around this situation sometimes, you know, or sometimes to change the order of the scenes. The scene means different things if it's there or there. It depends on what you know as a viewer before, stuff like that.
You know, I'm with Yorgos. You know, it's like film can be such a distillation. It's like a haiku. It's like a little poem. And you don't necessarily need much of a scene to convey the knowledge that you're trying to put out there.
In my own case, if I really reach a dead end in something, I stop working on it. And if it's close enough to quitting time, I'll go home and wake up in the morning sometimes and in the shower come up with something absolutely brilliant. Or terrible, depending on my mood at that time.
But mainly brilliant.
All right, next question is, how long did it take to edit your film?
Almost a year.
Yeah. Patrick?
We got through it pretty quick. We started at Thanksgiving, and we shortened the schedule. By 6 weeks into the director's cut, we were screening for an audience. So we were like, we like it, and the studio was like, are you sure you want to do that? Because this is your one chance. And and we're like, yeah, we're confident with it. And we scored, we actually went to Long Beach and we scored 100. And
100?
And then the studio said, okay, well, let's go back and try it in a more affluent
They're
area.
Never happy with that number.
Yeah, like let's go to Sherman Oaks.
What were they smoking? I mean,
so we went to Sherman Oaks 4 days later and we scored 100 again. So we were like, can we lock the film now?
Yes, but they want 101.
Yes, exactly.
They do.
How long did the favorite take?
Yes, I started editing after the edit was on the 4th month. Yorgos has started doing it with another editor, because I had to stay behind for the deer, and then I spent another 7 months to complete. So 11 months altogether, I think.
Exactly 1 year, mid-September to mid-September. That's through the final dub, of course.
on BlacKkKlansman, they wrapped on December 8th, and I showed Spike the whole film on January 8th, and they scored. Marvin Morris, the music editor, is right here. We scored 2 months later, right? In March. You know, we also, like Patrick and
Did you score 100?
101. So there.
But actually, were you on the film during the shooting too?
Yeah, it was, you know, but Spike doesn't want me to cut until we've seen the dailies together. And they were shooting outside of New York, up in Ossining. And so, you know, it wasn't like he was right there in New York and we could screen every day. We were lucky if we could screen on a Saturday. And so by the end of the shoot, there was a lot of stuff we had not screened, so we screened for a week, you know, after December 8th. And then over the Christmas hiatus, I actually took the film and cut it. And some of it was just on a laptop because I had to spend part of that time abroad. And I had my laptop and I had a monitor and a drive and cut it, you know. Yeah. That's how you can do it these days. I know. You know, people sometimes say, "Oh, do you have an editing room there?"
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we have an editing room.
Right in my shoulder bag, exactly. All That Jazz, I think, was 14 months. That was about the longest I've ever worked. And Network was 5 months. So the shortest I've ever worked.
Malcolm X was 13 months.
Which one?
Malcolm X.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Natural Born Killers was 16.
Jack the Giant Slayer was 24 and so worth it.
Well, Patrick?
The longest I've ever worked is not quite a year. So I've worked on, most of the stuff I've done is lower budget and they want you get the heck out.
You just have to be slower, man.
That's right.
Do you have a fun experience?
Yorgis, what was your longest?
Yeah.
Yorgis?
What's that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the favorite, or usually it's like that 7-8 months.
These are commitments that we do.
And because, you know, if we're not editing, if we're not working during those times, I mean, that film doesn't do anything, right? It stops. Because during the editing process, it's all on us.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
So-
it's not getting any worse.
No more stuff is coming into the cutting room.
No.
Right, you don't have to run in place a lot.
I was asked questions like that before. I just want to say, because we worked in the Moviola before, and it was slower procedure. But people ask me, do you work faster now because of the technology? But I say no, because the mind needs to adapt to the situation. So it's the same time.
Yeah. When Avids first came in, people thought, well, now you can work much more quickly, but they leave out the human element.
Yeah, you have to digest these films.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Any more questions?
No, that's the last question, and we just have a reminder that Alan is going to conclude the panel, and we'd like you to stay seated to give our nominees a head start to the lobby where they'll be. And Stephen Ripkin's going to come back and announce where the gifts are, okay? So Alan is going to thank our nominees.
Okay, I will officially thank the panel. You guys have been absolutely great.
Thank you.
I'll see you at dinner. You guys
Down the mic, please. Could everyone please remain in your seats? Just for a moment. I just want to say one thing. All of the editors that were on the panel did an extraordinary job, and as you notice, many of the clips included a master of creativity of unscripted scenes that were not designed to be cut the way they were, and their innovation, I think, is to be commended. It's a testament to their mastery and creativity. All right, so now here's what we're going to do. Blackmagic has generously donated 10 DaVinci Resolve 15 studio softwares. Under your seats, you may find a card that says, "You've won," and I'm going to say, on the main floor, L10, Q4, S109, U9, F3, M101. These are seat numbers.